Welcome to another breakdown on the Sweet Science of Fighting channel. Today we're going to go through some of B Team's strength and conditioning. So if you're not familiar, B Team is one of the most prominent Jiu-Jitsu gyms, I guess, in the entire world, mainly in Austin, but one of the more prominent ones led by Craig Jones. Obviously, their rivals, New Wave, are also here in Austin, but we're going to run through a video on the B Team channel, an older one now, with Zach Talander. Zach Talander is actually a very prominent weightlifting YouTuber, and he takes, let me turn the sound off and you can kind of read the subtitles here if you need to, but basically he's going to take them through a basic strength training routine for jiu-jitsu athletes, and we will break it down and give you some insight into everything. It's all timestamped, so it's a long video, so I'll be skipping through it just to get to the point so you're not sitting here just watching an entire video when you could just watch it on its own. So alright, so first part, mobility for squatting. So sitting in a squat position and using a pole as a counterbalance. Now, if you do struggle to get into the bottom of a squat position, this is a really good move to do before you do any kind of squatting. So for this video, just for reference, we have Nicky Rod on the very left, Ethan Crenlinson on the right. There are both B Team Jiu-Jitsu athletes. So that squat position, you want to be able to ideally sit in that position to get yourself ready to squat down there. Now, there are some very, very stiff athletes and people that literally cannot get into the bottom position without having load on them. There are some very prominent weightlifters that fit that category. But ideally, you should be able to sit there without load. So just doing a little bit of that before you squat, bouncing around a bit, can definitely help. Is there such thing as going too long in that position? Yeah, I mean, if you're sitting 10 minutes in that position and then trying to do squats, yeah, it's probably a problem. But bounce around a couple of minutes and you're doing other things before as you go into heavier squats, you're going to be fine. So yeah, getting into those bottom positions is nice. You'll typically find the ankles are the main issues of people trying to get in those positions because the knee can't go forward enough for yourself to sit into those deep positions. So let's see what else we got. Okay, so first thing, we have the goblet squat. So this is typically my first, I guess you could say, progression if I'm teaching someone how to squat, is using the goblet squat, just because in the goblet position it acts as a counterbalance. So for people who can't hit depth, holding something in front makes it 10,000 times easier to hit depth. If you struggle to hit depth and hit deep squats with the barbell, if you do goblet squats, you'll be able to do it pretty much instantly. So it's a really good way to load it. Plus, once you get stronger and better at it, you can actually load this pretty heavy as a main strength exercise if you wanted to for jiu-jitsu, because it's going to develop the upper body postures you need for jiu-jitsu, where you're obviously not trying to be rounded over, you're trying to fight people breaking your posture. So holding like super heavy dumbbells or kettlebells in that position. You can even drape chains over your neck and do it if you want to look hardcore. But doing both those, it's a good exercise, and it can be a good warm-up too, going into your actual squats. So I think those are Alico rotating dumbbells too, that one there. Those are very nice, expensive dumbbells. Okay, so we've gone through the goblet squat. We're now on to the front squat. Now, for me, I much prefer the front squat over the back squat, typically for most people. One, it tends to feel more natural when you're squatting with the bar in front of you versus on the back. Two, it places less stress on the lower back. And obviously, typically, jiu-jitsu athletes and combat athletes generally tend to have lower back issues, and back squatting can flare that up. So I like the front squat. And then the front squat also challenges, again, that same posture like the goblet squat does. So kind of a 3-in-1 there with that versus just loading it on your back. Now, some people won't be able to get into that clean position, which they were showing before, with the bar on your fingertips in that front rack, just from mobility reasons. That's completely fine. You don't have to do that clean grip rack position, which Zach's showing us. You don't have to be in this position. This is ideal, but you don't need to be there. There's other aggressions. If you actually go on the Sweet Science Fighting YouTube channel, which you're on now, I have a front squat video. Actually, no, in my vlog, I think it's vlog 1 or 2, I actually show you me front squatting using these straps. Actually, it might even be vlog 4, actually. I show front squatting with the straps. But you can also front squat cross grip as well, like a bodybuilder. All of those are completely fine. There's no rule where you have to do it a certain way. The other option is if front squatting and stuff in the barbell is just a no-go. Using safety squat bars are awesome. because the hands are in front. So that makes it, basically you have no mobility restrictions in your upper body, and it loads similar-ish to a front squat. It's like a hybrid front squat, bank squat loading when we're talking about the safety squat bar. You can also use cambered bars that almost come like this, like 90-degree angles, and you can have your hands to the side. Again, that reduces the loading, but that will be on your back too. But because the weight sits in front, you end up being a little more upright. So those are just things to consider. I also typically like the front squat as well, because even though you load a front squat heavy, you're never maximally taxing the legs as such. I mean, you're still going to tax them, and they're still going to be fatigued depending on how much volume you do. But compared to a back squat, if you're doing, say, 80 to 90% 1RM back squats versus 80 to 90% 1RM front squats, the absolute load is much lighter. And that absolute loading means you typically have a little less fatigue going into whatever else you need to do. Yeah, and then obviously being more upright. I found as well, it tends to be a little nice, even though the knees track forward further, and it tends to be more, I guess you could say, a little more quaddy than a back squat. It still feels nicer on the knees. I would advise you wear weightlifting shoes during front squats for sure, because the elevated heel will help you sit down into depth. Doing it with in flat shoes or no shoes, you can do it if you have very good ankle mobility and stuff, but the weightlifting shoes will help you feel way more stable. It's well worth it. So we're looking at front squats now. Let's just see how we front squats before we move on. He's got good mobility, see in his flat shoes, so that's perfect. I would say you really have to focus on keeping those elbows high. So his elbows are drifting down as he squats. Like those arms shouldn't come anywhere near his knees. Your elbows should be trying to be like, you push up as far as possible to maintain that really upright, big chest position. Because as you start to fatigue, then you start to round over. Now, in terms of reps, he's doing very high rep front squats. I typically don't program high reps with front squats for this reason, where you lose posture very quickly. And then it kind of just takes the loading off the legs because you're just struggling with your upper body. So I typically cap front squat reps at like 8. I very rarely go there. I'm usually more like 6. So it'll be like 6 to 8 in terms of front squats. If I'm going to do high rep squats, it's just going to be back squats. The high rep front squat is killer. I think it just takes too much out of the upper body. So they're doing 20 reps as a baseline. Okay, so they're doing that as a test just so they can base their numbers off, I think. Okay. So again, here's your bodybuilder cross grip. That's perfect. Here's a really nice squat, actually. Solid. But yes, you can use that grip too. So next, after the front squat, so we've got mobility warm-up, goblet squat, front squat. Then we're moving on to, looks like, the conventional deadlift. Touch and go deadlifts. Okay, so they're doing it from the top down. Almost like a pseudo Romanian deadlift. Okay, he's teaching the deadlift to get from the top down. So that's typically a good way to teach the deadlift, is teaching it from the top down position, because it's a hip hinge at heart. So that hip hinge, pushing the hips back and loading the hamstrings like that. So that will be RDL, and then just bending your legs at the end. So I don't know if he's doing the deadlift or if he's doing the RDL. Let me see. Okay, he's doing the deadlift. Yeah, just teaching that pattern. He doesn't quite have the technique down. Just showing them that. Yeah. So for me, deadlifting definitely has its place. I prefer, if you are going to deadlift specifically for Jiu-Jitsu, I would prefer the trap bar. I think for all sports, to be honest. I think for the similar reasons to the front squat to the back squat, the trap bar you can make it more hingy or squatty depending on your body angle, but it takes the stress off the lower back. You're able to actually lift the trap bar faster than a regular barbell if you look at some of that research. So you can ideally develop more power. You can also use the trap bar for various jumps, etc., that don't load the spine so much. So those are some really good options. Plus, you can shorten the range of motion with the high handles as well. So I really do like the trap bar just for maximum deadlifts. Typically, I prefer that if I'm going to have a squat as a main lower body movement in the program, then I'll use the Romanian deadlift instead of the deadlift. Not always, but often, because one, your squat is kind of like your maximum lower body effort movement, but then your deadlift is also a maximum lower body effort movement. So you're kind of doubling up. Yes, they work slightly different muscles, etc., but I'd much rather have I feel there's more benefits in heavier squats versus heavier deadlifts for most athletes. And one of them is because you have the eccentric portion of the squat, which you don't typically have on the deadlift. And then secondly, you typically, I'll say a little less risk of injury on the squat versus the deadlift, because the deadlift you have to set up with tension from the floor, and then you have to really strain, and you don't have that stretch reflex to rely on. So it's just something to bear in mind. I really do like the Romanian deadlift over the deadlift because it's a pure hip hinge. So you're really loading the hamstrings and the glutes, versus the deadlift. You are getting some glute and hamstring, but you're not getting as much as the Romanian deadlift. I'd rather hit my front squat to be more quote unquote quaddy, or develop that part of that push, and then the RDL to really develop the backside. The front squat and deadlift tend to be a little too close for my liking. And just in terms of fatigue for training. If you're doing, say, one day squats and another day deadlifts, both very heavy, because you're doing maximal strength work, and you're still rolling or grappling 3, 4, 5, 6 times a week, it can take its toll. So we've done deadlift. What else we got going on? Rows. Okay. Yep, barbell rows. I really do like barbell rows too. So even if this was one training session, this is actually it's pretty solid. There are some changes that I would make, and we'll touch on that at the end once we go through everything. So barbell rows now. So typically with barbell rows, I like to do them now resetting on the floor each time, not like a pen leg row. A pen leg row is wider grip, staying parallel to the floor, explosive pull into your upper chest. I'll keep a normal barbell row grip like this, but reset at the floor each time, really controlled. So it'll be here, yeah, without that jerking. So I try to be really strict and reset on the floor each time, so you're controlling it all the way down. You don't get that bounce. And I think you target the back even harder than doing this with yourself just, I guess, hanging the weight down and bouncing off the floor. So having that control, you really nail the erectors, the traps, the lats, etc. And I think it's just more beneficial for just being strong in that position. Now we've got a little complex. Romanian deadlift to row. That's a nice little complex, to be honest. Obviously, you'll be very limited in the weight you can use based on how much you can row. But if you were going to do some kind of work capacity block in your training, as an example, this could be something you could use. Complexes are very useful for developing work capacity, or the ability to maintain power output over an extended period. So typically, I'm very fond of Olympic weightlifting complexes for grapplers. And then if you're not very well versed in Olympic weightlifting, then barbell complexes can take their place. But weightlifting complexes would be things like power cleans, push press. It could be pulls into various power cleans, into front squats, etc. A very common one is power clean, front squat, jerk, or push press as an example as well. So those complexes can make it very difficult. Obviously with barbell complexes, you can do like a few deadlifts, a few rows, a few Romanian deadlifts, and then a few hang power. Like, I think the bear complex is the common one that most people know, but they have their place, especially during a block. Maybe that's like, say you've just competed and you have a longer preparation period before your next tournament, then that's when you would do something like a work capacity block. So we've got that one. Quick break. Weighted pull-ups, of course, a staple. There's not much really to say about this. I will say though about the grips. So one secret to really nailing your lats and your back and reducing the involvement of your biceps and arms is to, instead of holding it with your thumbs around the bar, have your thumbs over the bar like a monkey grip, and then think about like pulling with your pinky and your ring fingers when you do your pull-up. And when you do that, you'll find that you have a little less involvement of the biceps and arms, and you can really involve the back further. So give that a try. Another thing with grips is typically you don't want to use the same grip width and the same grip orientation every set, every workout for ever and ever. Ideally, you want to vary it as much as possible. Typically, if you stick with one grip, you may run into some kind of elbow pain. Depending on your elbow, sometimes the underhand chin-up grip can cause some elbow pain. If it's good for you, then continue doing it. But maybe workout to workout, cycle to cycle, or even set to set, go from underhands to neutrals to overhands, etc. Just so you're varying that grip. It can help just keep your elbows healthy. Another option, if you have rings or something that rotates, then you don't need to vary your grip because it rotates naturally as you pull, so you don't tend to run into the same problems. So bear that in mind. Typically with the weighted pull-ups, I tend to like to sit in the 5 to 6 rep range, sometimes as low as 3, depending, but 5 to 6 is typically where I sit. And obviously with body weight, you can kind of go max reps, and that tends to work really well. You can even go like, for example, a few sets of 5 to 6 reps weighted, and then you could go take the weight off and then do like 1 or 2 more sets just body weight burning out. And that can be good options too, just for developing pulling strength. And then we finally have dips. Now, I never program dips, and it's not because dips aren't a good movement. Dips are an awesome movement to use, and if you can do them, do them. But I don't program them. Just from my personal experience, dips absolutely fuck my sternum up. And I've tried a billion different ways and times of trying to get back into dips when I was younger. I just can't do it. It just destroys my sternum, where I can't cough or sneeze without pain, and in 6 months, and I can't even do bench press, I can't press, I can't do anything. So, and I know a lot of athletes that I've worked with have feel a similar sternum pain or stress from doing dips, so I don't program it. But if you can do it and you don't have an issue with your sternum or anything like that, then I would definitely do them as one of your main pressing movements. They are a solid way to build your chest, shoulders, and triceps. There's not much really to say other than you can be more upright for more triceps. You can lean a little more forward for more chest. But we aren't bodybuilders. So regardless, just do your dips for pressing strength. So overall, if we were going to sum up this session, so if this is labeled a simple strength workout for grapplers, but I think he's just put together a few different exercises that he likes. This is not... Yeah, this is 5 movements that you're going to do, or some form of it. Yeah, so this isn't one session, I was going to say. You would use something like this as kind of a guideline. So let's say you're doing front squats, you might do Romanian deadlift, you might do some kind of row, some kind of press. Yeah, so really simple. Squat, Romanian deadlift, row or pull up, and then dips in this instance. That's 4 exercises. Super simple, basic strength training. Now, this is especially good if you're an intermediate or beginner or intermediate within the gym and you're getting started. You can run those 4 exercises, and if you're going again a second day, you could do a different form of squat. It could be a goblet squat as your second form, and it could be a deadlift as your main lower body movement. Then you could do your weighted pull-ups. And then for your pressing movement, instead of dips, you could do push-ups or bench press or dumbbell bench or whatever it is. That will be your second day. It's exactly the same format. And then your third day, you can literally just repeat the first day. And then you can kind of swap those each week, and you can choose which day you do double of. That would be an example of how you could set a very simple strength training program. Now, this only addresses strength and size. This does not address speed and power development, and it does not address general, you could say, movement quality outside of just going up and down, which is completely fine. As a beginner intermediate, those are going to improve anyway as you get stronger in these. But then once you get to a point where you're, lifting some decent weight, and I would say some decent weight typically for athletes, if you can front squat 1.25 to 1.5 times your body weight, if you can deadlift 1.5 to 2 times your body weight, if you can do 10 body weight pull-ups, out of it, like just those small standards there, does getting a lot stronger really help you be a better jiu-jitsu athlete? Yeah, it's debatable. Would you be better off maybe working on more power development, etc.? Probably, speed and power development. But that's why within my programs, I don't leave any of that out ever. So it's not like you suddenly do strength for 1 to 2 to 3 years and then, I suddenly need speed and power, I'm going to start doing that. But you haven't done it for 2 to 3 years. For you to be able to ease your way into it, that's going to take a long time. Plus, if you don't ease your way into it, like most people don't do, you're going to fuck yourself up pretty good. Trying to do some weighted jumps and various plyometrics, etc. So that's why I always have a thread of it in all my programs, regardless of where you are in your training. It's just different volumes and different types, depending on where you are in your training cycle. So for example, if you're going to run, say, the program I just mentioned using these exercises at the very beginning, so you might do your squat mobility, just as an example. Let's just say you did light goblet squats to warm up. After that, cool. Then you'll go into, if you were just doing preparation stuff, you would do some kind of extensive or submaximal medicine ball throw circuits. If you just look up extensive medicine ball circuits on YouTube, there's quite a few. And then extensive plyometric and jump circuits. I have an old video on that too on the channel. You can check that out. I give 3 examples you can use. And essentially it's basically a circuit of jumps and plyometrics, high volume, low intensity, to help prepare your muscles and tendons for the more intense plyometrics and jumps that you'll do later on. Surprisingly, you can actually improve power, jump height, etc. just through these submaximal jumps. So you would do that, and that will be essentially an extended warm-up before you go into your strength work. Then as you progress through your training, then you might start to add things, more, I guess, speed and power development, things that are more intense, things like your box jumps, broad jumps, loaded jumps. Then you can obviously go into more fast ground contact jumps like hurdle hops, drop jumps, death jumps, potentially if you get really advanced. And then once you go from there, then you can go into things like complexing things together. Front squat with box jumps as a superset. And then if you want to go very, very advanced, which will be way down the line, you can look at French contrast, and you can look at pairing 4 exercises together into a, I guess you could say, a power circuit as such in those 4 exercises. And then you've got more things you can lay on top of that with accentuated eccentric training to develop these adaptations. You can look at various flywheel training. I'll touch on that in a bit as well to accentuate that eccentric and power development. There's a lot of things you can do once you get a little more advanced, but this is a good way to start as you are beginning as an intermediate, I guess, lifter or even a beginner lifter. I would just add some form of speed power development or throws in there, because you're going to want to do that further down the line. And that's why I never get far away from things that you're going to be doing. So that's just my insights there. If you want to check out my programs, they're on the Sweet Science of Fighting Underground. That's all in the description too. But I'll see you in the next breakdown.